in here today, I ended up down the pub over the road with a group of about 200 Royal Marines. I'm a bit of a sucker for a man in a uniform, surprisingly for a lesbian, but it's not a funny talk, people. But I'm warming you up. And, you know, got talking to them. They were there at some protest, some march. I couldn't quite get the gist of because they'd been in the pub for quite some time. But, you know, as the daughter of an ex-paratrooper and the admiring little sister of an RAF officer, I've got a lot of time. I've got a lot of time for a man in a uniform. So we stood there and we had a chat, and they asked me what I was doing. I was standing with my walking stick at the time, and a couple of them were like, well, you know, where were you injured? And I was like, it was rheumatoid arthritis, actually. Sorry. And we had a good old chat, and I started to talk to them a bit about what I was doing here today and why I was popping over the road, and they talked to me about why they were there. I find it very important to stop and consider history sometimes. I think if we know and understand our history, we know and understand our humanity, and we can hopefully prevent events from the past being repeated in the future. Now, this might seem like a really odd lead-in, but it will start to make sense towards the end. My old friend, Hetty Bauer, she died a couple of years ago, aged 108. She was still campaigning at 108 years old beside me at the Labour Party conference in 2014 for what she believed in. Hetty was one of the protesters at the Battle of Cable Street. Hetty marched against austerity. She marched against the war. She marched and she marched and she marched in her yellow Macintosh against injustice and unfairness and inhumanity. And how I wish it was Hetty Bauer standing here on this stage instead of me today, telling her stories. How I wish Hetty was still here, because how this world, divided and broken, needs a Hetty Bauer more than ever. In our post-referendum, Brexit means Brexit, broken Britain. We need people like Hetty. And maybe we can find one here. Maybe you know a Hetty. Maybe you can be a Hetty. Because at the moment, we're just silenced, aren't we? We're silenced by the worry that if we speak our minds, someone might unfriend us on Facebook. We're silenced by if we call out our racist uncle, he might not talk to us at the next family wedding, or we might not get invited ourselves. We're silenced by fear of being seen to speak up for what's right. I mean, who wants to be a hand-wringing liberal lefty these days? People say to me, oh, you champagne socialist. Like, who doesn't want a glass of bubbly and universal healthcare? I mean, why is that an insult? So fewer and fewer of us speak our truth. It's easier to be apathetic, easier to wring our hands, easier to say it's not our problem, it's not our fault, it's those bloody immigrants, isn't it? It's the benefit scroungers, it's the lazy, it's the feckless, it's the work shy, it's the single mothers. Well, I was one of those single mothers, and that's how I happened to be standing here, slightly awkwardly limping around on stage. Because at my lowest ebb, I was walking through my local neighbourhood in Southend, and I saw on the front cover of our local newspaper a councillor saying that druggies, drunks and single mums were ruining the high street. And I wrote a letter to the paper. And it was angry, and it was so angry they had to print it in 3 parts because it had too many fuckings in it for one edition of the Southend Evening Echo. And, I mean, but austerity, it's a word that we're sick of, isn't it? We've been hearing about it since about 2009. Austerity, it's necessary, we need to tighten our belts. But what about when those belts are tightened around the necks of the most desperate who hang themselves from the rafters because their benefits have been cut? Because that was a friend of mine. That belt tightening don't sound so fucking good now, does it? Because there's nothing nostalgic about missing days of meals, turning off the fridge because it's empty anyway, of dragging your toddler through the pouring rain to every pub and every shop in walking distance and asking them if they've got any jobs available. And you try not to go red as the girl behind the counter looks you up and down at your tatty jumper and your tatty jeans. And she says, no, nothing available. And you add the not for you in your head. And you drag that toddler home to not quite dry out in your freezing cold flat. And you pour some tinned tomatoes over some basic crappy pasta. And you try not to hurl it at the wall in frustration when he says, I don't want that, Mummy, I want something else. Because there isn't anything else. But aren't you just supposed to keep calm and carry on? Dramatic pause while I find my part of my notes. You put 2 jumpers on that you'll wear all week because you sit at home in your coat and a bobble hat anyway, and nobody's there to notice. You're piling misery upon misery upon misery, and when you can't go down the pub with your mates anymore, people tend to forget you exist. You drag yourself to the cooker again and again and again and again for things that your kid won't eat. That's all you've got to give him. You get up the next morning, you give him the last Weetabix, mashed with a little bit of water, with a glass of tap water to wash it down with. "Where's Mummy's breakfast?" he asks, all big blue eyes and 2-year-old concern, and you tell him that you're not hungry. Mummy wasn't hungry the night before. Mummy wasn't hungry the night before that after, and sooner or later he'll notice that Mummy just isn't hungry anymore. Hunger hurts. It kills. Austerity kills. Admitting that you can't afford to feed yourself or your child is terrifying. Admitting to any authority that you are failing as a parent to provide the most basic needs for your 2-year-old who you brought into this world fills you with the fear that he might just be taken into care. And you know what? When you haven't got a telly, and you haven't got a light bulb, and you haven't got a fridge, and you haven't got a kettle, and you haven't got a microwave, and you haven't even got any fucking bedding, and that child is all you've got left, the last thing you want to do in the world is to lose him. So you wrap him up in a baby grow, and you stick a dressing gown on, and you curl up asleep behind him because he's all you've got left in the world. And aren't we just supposed to keep calm and carry on? Now, I've told this story time and time and time again, and it's not just me. It's not just me, but I'm the one that has the platform. I'm the one that gets to do the TED Talks. I'm the one that writes in The Guardian about how miserable my life was. So a couple of days ago, I started asking other people for their stories. I said, I'm trying to write a book at the moment called Hunger Hurts. That was the title of my blog post back in the day, July 2012. And I'd like to hear from you. 48 hours later, I have 2,421 emails in my inbox, and I'm going to share some of them with you. Last night, a support worker wrote to me about a vulnerable man he'd taken to the job centre to be assessed as to whether he still deserved his benefits as an unemployed disabled person. It said on his notes that he was doubly incontinent. In order to continue to receive his benefits, the assessor reportedly told him to defecate in his pants on the spot to prove it. What have we become? Letters are sent to vulnerable adults demanding that they attend a meeting the next day, sent to people who can't read and can't write. They don't turn up because they can't read the letter, and they've got no one there to read it for them, so they lose their benefits. If they're lucky, they end up at a food bank. A 23-year-old man wrote to me distraught that his epilepsy was causing him such extreme anxiety that at the time of writing, he hadn't left his house for 9 weeks. He said, "Imagine my shame at having to write in detail at how many times a day I wet myself because of my seizures. I'm too scared to shower now in case I fall and hit my head and die. Nobody's listening to me." One woman had an epileptic fit on the day of her assessment and was unable to attend the job centre. In her absence, she was declared fit for work and received no payments for 17 weeks. Another had a brain hemorrhage and was deemed fit for work 2 weeks later. One was told, a few weeks before she died from untreatable lung cancer, that if she could pick up the phone to the DWP, she could work. Another woman was hauled in for an assessment a week after having a lung removed. Her assessor apologised and said, "I forgot you had cancer." And finally, a woman who had severe mental health problems but still worked was supposed to receive top-up benefits in order to top up her meagre income. But instead, she had no lights in her home. She had no fridge, she had no electricity, she had no kettle, she had no bed, she had no mattress. She wrapped herself up in a duvet and slept on the floor. Do you know what she did for a living? She cleaned this damn building. And I was asked here today to talk about the politics of food. And as soon as I realised where I was going, I knew what I had to do. Because these are the politics of food. There's nothing more political than deliberately denying someone the most basic human need, and that is food. That is bread, that is rice, that is Sainsbury's Basics tinned tomatoes. That is the most meagre of things that people are being picked up on by food banks because the support systems we're supposed to have in place don't work, and it doesn't work. I don't know how many of you here, give me a show of hands if you've seen Ken Loach's film, I, Daniel Blake, since it came out. That's nice, about 10. 20? Can I ask you all to watch it? Because it's not a fairy story. It's my story. I know it's my story because I was part of the research for that film. So to hear people say to me that that's not real, it didn't happen, to have commentators saying this is just the very worst of situations, I'm like, no, it's not, because I've got 2,000 more in my inbox. This happens. And I'm generally quite a depressing person to hear speak. I was told to come and talk about time. I believe it's time to act. I believe it's time that we can change. I think that every single one of us in this room has got at least one thing that we could do. And if every single one of us did one thing, how much better a place would the world become? I'm tired of trying to change the world. I just want to kind of change mine. But if we all wanted to change the little sphere around us, if we all used what little power we had, if Hetty Bauer can go out marching at 108 years old, imagine what we can do. Imagine what we all can do. Now, people say, what can I do? You can donate something to your local food bank, things that people need, like sanitary protection. Imagine, ladies, having your period and not having anything to put between your legs. Imagine the indignity of having to wad up an old sock or a piece of tissue. It's not an exaggeration, I've been there, and it's crap. But imagine having to do that again and again and again. Donate tins of anything ambient, herbs, spices. Just because people are poor doesn't mean they have to just eat plain rice. I mean, what are we? We're England, we're Britain. We're supposed to be great, we're supposed to care about our fellow man, we're supposed to be compassionate. What have we become? You can be an advocate. You can get in touch with the Citizens Advice Bureau, you can donate to advocacy services, you can march, you can lobby, you can protest, you can do TED Talks, you can stand on stages and horrify people with your horrible stories of how terrible the world really is. But it is time to act, and it is time to change, and we can do something about it. Now, when I finish, I'm going back to the pub, because I mean, God, I need a beer, I don't know about you lot. And I'm going to hook up with my friends that I was standing talking to at the bar. Because one of the reasons why I do what I'm doing at the moment is for a man called David Clapton. David was a former soldier in the British Army. He did 5 years service in Belfast. He left, worked for 16 years as a BT engineer and another 8 years in various jobs. He left those jobs, 24 years service and 5 years in the army to care for his very elderly, very sick mum. A former soldier. He fought for our country. He fought for our freedoms, and he died with £3.44 in his pocket, an out-of-date tin of sardines in his cupboard, and a pile of CVs next to his dead body. And I'm going back down the pub, and I'm going to recruit those bloody Marines, and I'm going to ask them to fight with me, and I'm going to ask them to march with me, and I'm going to ask them to stand with me, and I'm going to ask every single one of you to do the same. Because the times, they are changing. And we are becoming more selfish and more insular, and we hide behind cat gifs and shit on Facebook because we don't want to look out and look at the world. Well, I'm giving the world and I'm putting it in your faces, and I'm telling you that every single one of you can do something about it. Thank you.